Now, medical marijuana in California just took one toke forward and then like 3 really slow tokes back. We're going to explain in the loop. Medical marijuana laws are spreading across this country like weeds. But a vote that's 2.5 years in the making by the Los Angeles City Council is alarming pro-marijuana advocates with its broad changes for the city's 1,000-plus dispensaries. The new law seeks to cap the city's dispensaries by as much as 90%, preventing franchising and any location operating for profit. It also insists that dispensaries close no later than 8 p.m. and that patients only be permitted membership at one location. The city claims these measures are needed to protect its safety and well-being. But has Los Angeles gone too far in its effort to control the flourishing medical marijuana industry? And should dispensaries be entitled to the same rights held by your local pharmacy? Hey, it ain't easy being green. It's The Loop. And joining me now from Oakland to help us make sense of it all, Executive Director for Harborside Health Center, Steve D'Angelo is here. How are you, Steve?
I'm doing well.
Thank you for coming on, not only because you run an incredible operation, but because your knowledge in this field is just unparalleled. And last week, the Los Angeles City Council voted on some pretty major controls for medical marijuana dispensaries. We kind of glossed over them there in the setup, but what are the biggest changes in store for these locations if this is actually passed into law?
Well, of course, the biggest change is a dramatic reduction in the number of dispensaries in Los Angeles. That would be the largest change. The council is talking about 70 dispensaries citywide, which would be quite a change from the several hundred now existing.
And yet, some people, though, Steve, would point to that and say, but LA's gone crazy with dispensaries. It's the Wild West of weed. There's more dispensaries than McDonald's, and even Ronald's giving out sativa with Happy Meals. Like they're all worried about that. Is that such a negative thing to have that many closed down?
I don't think that it's an inappropriate step. I think that there have been too many dispensaries in Los Angeles. It's not a question of whether or not the city regulates dispensaries, but how it's doing it. And there's some specific provisions of the proposed regulations that are disturbing. One of them is a 1,000-foot proximity limit, which would prevent dispensaries from opening in just about every area of the city. If that rule is applied, you're going to see many areas of the city underserved and access severely curtailed for patients in need.
Yeah, and there's other effects for patients here as well, correct?
Yeah, there are some really disturbing provisions. One of them is a provision that patients register with one dispensary and only be permitted to go to one dispensary. This is a really bad idea. Dispensaries are social entrepreneurship ventures. On the one hand, they are not-for-profit organizations, and I think should be not-for-profit organizations. On the other hand, they provide goods and services. And what we know about companies that provide goods and services is that if there's not some competition built into the marketplace, the price of goods increases and the quality of services decrease. I don't think that's something that would be good for medical cannabis patients or for the city of Los Angeles.
Sure, and when someone like yourself runs an operation that I think sort of sets really the gold standard in a way a dispensary should be run, this law, if it were to go into effect, that means you could not open one in Los Angeles, right? Because you would then be considered a franchise?
Well, it would depend on how they construe that, but yes, as written right now, they're saying that they would only allow one outlet per operator. So that would prevent someplace like Harborside Health Center from bringing our model to Los Angeles.
And Steve, there's an expression that sort of, as goes California, so goes the nation. So do dispensaries outside of LA, do they need to be worried as well?
I don't think that the LA model is going to spread to the rest of the country. What you saw in LA really was an abdication of regulatory responsibility on the part of the council. They waited 2.5 years to regulate. If you contrast that with the situation in Oakland, where we regulated in 2004, I think you'll find that the Oakland regulations are actually a much better example of the way the rest of the country should proceed. So
I think it's important to point out that, Steve, people like yourself, you're not concerned necessarily with regulation. You think there should be regulation. You're just concerned about this level of regulation this late in the game.
I think everybody in the medical cannabis industry welcomes regulation. Most dispensary operators really do want to comply with the law, really do want to provide medicine in a safe, seemly, and responsible fashion. We just need some clear direction from the jurisdictions in which we're located in order to comply with those regulations.
Well, Steve, I have some friends here in Los Angeles that say, hey, dude, relax, don't worry. This ordinance is probably, even if it happens, it doesn't matter. And California by November, it's going to be legal, so don't worry about it. Is that the right approach?
No, that's exactly the wrong approach. People who care about cannabis can never afford to even let one battle in the battle for freedom unfought. It's very important that we engage on every level. It's true, there is an initiative on the ballot in 2010 that would essentially legalize cannabis in California, but it's not a certain thing that that initiative is going to pass, and it's not a certain thing that if the initiative does pass, that there won't be lawsuits fighting its implementation. So I'd encourage anybody who cares about cannabis in Los Angeles to contact their council people and let them know that that while regulation is appropriate and supported by the community, these regulations do go too far and have some very restrictive clauses in them.
Is that all we can do, though, Steve? I mean, hundreds of us took to the streets in the rain to support Conan. So we might care about this issue a little bit more. Is it simply picking up a phone and calling a congressperson, or is there a website or some sort of movement?
Yes, there is a great movement, and you should contact Americans for Safe Access. Their website is safeaccessnow.org.
Perfect. We'll use our Google Voice speech-to-text, and it'll put it in for us. Where do things stand on marijuana going legal countrywide, Steve? Is it going to be adopted all across the U.S.?
Well, if you take a look at public opinion polls, what you see is about 70% of Americans support medical cannabis, but only about 40% support legalized cannabis, which means 25 to 30% of Americans simultaneously support medical cannabis and are against legalized cannabis. I think that the reservations that they have stem from the lack of a positive model of cannabis distribution. So I think that the most important thing that our movement can do in order to convince those swing voters is to produce positive examples of cannabis distribution, to allay their fears and demonstrate to them that cannabis can actually bring a positive benefit to communities. It doesn't have to bring harms.
And I think an honest truth commercial or two might not hurt it as well. So thanks to Steve D'Angelo from Harborside Health Center for keeping us in the loop. Appreciate your time, sir.
Most welcome.